I would use the grinder here, but it's been broken for I don't even know how long. I keep meaning to ask my dad if he still has the receipt for it because he bought it as a gift to make the coffee station up here in my landlady's place functional. And we need to check into, Dad, if you see this, we need to see if we can get this repaired under warranty. European warranty law, very good. Hopefully should be covered. Today we're going to talk about something that I've avoided talking about publicly for my entire YouTube career, I suppose. I've talked about it a little bit on my podcast. I have alluded to it over the course of time, but I haven't wanted to talk about my mom and my estrangement from my mom until I was ready, because it's a really serious subject. I've taken very serious action, and it's taken me years, both in therapy, friendships, space. It's taken me a lot of time to actually figure out what's going on. And I wanted to make sure that if and when I came to the point that I would speak about it, that I could do so from a place of health, right? Like I didn't want to come into this to vent, to lambast anybody, to air my grievances. The reason that I'm doing this is twofold. One, because that's just kind of the contract that I have with you if you're watching my vlog, is just to share my life honestly, and especially as I process these things. And two is because I know that I'm not alone, but I really struggled with feeling like I was alone for most of my life, if not my entire life. Like really only recently have I felt the release of knowing that this is actually fairly normal, even if it's not culturally normal, even if we don't really fully accept it. And even though I'm sure there will be people in the comments who are very upset with me for making the decisions that I've made, it doesn't matter. This is my life, and I've made the choices that I made. And I wanted to wait until I was in a place where I knew and felt that deep in my gut before I opened the door to, whatever comes. I do tend to make coffee up here, though, in the mornings. I love my Mocha Master. This was a gift from my landlady as well. And, oh my gosh, I love this thing. I did take the time to write down a couple of notes, kind of like bullet points of what I wanted to make sure to say, some things I thought I would share. But I also think that ultimately, I'm just going to kind of treat this like a little bit of a garage monologue. So you've probably already seen the length of the video. I don't know what that is yet, but you know better than I do. Cooper, let me get you some water really quick. I will let you know off the bat that this makes me a little stressed. It doesn't really make me nervous, although you're going to see lines in my head now from this hat. But it is a little bit scary, and I think you'll understand why. I mean, I'm sure you understand already, but it's also something that I have known I needed to do for a very long time, and I've been waiting to do. And I think that the baseline important thing that I've finally learned is that we don't know any better as children. We don't know that what we grow up with is healthy or unhealthy or how it's unhealthy. And everybody has stuff to deal with. And so I think it's also a thing of like, I don't think of myself as particularly unique or special, which is an important element of walking out of the shadow of feeling alone. I think one of the ways that we end up coping with trauma, childhood trauma especially, but maybe a lot of different types of trauma, is to believe that we are special, that we're unique. That's how we tell ourselves we can get through it, especially if you're someone like me who was not told they were special or unique, at least by the primary caregivers in my life, in a way that sinks in at all. And so you have to tell yourself that, and you have to believe it. Otherwise, you might as well despair. You might as well give up. And maybe I am very lucky that I had that belief deep down inside me somewhere that kept me going. I don't know if everybody has that or not, but I know that that was definitely something that kept me going. And then as an adult, I came to realize, oh, I'm so actually not unique, that there are clinical terms for what I went through. So that's actually where I thought I would start too, for those of you, the cliff notes and the TLDR, for those of you read up on the literature or perhaps are clinicians yourself, is ultimately I had a disinterested primary caregiver, which is a term that I learned from reading The Body Keeps the Score, which is a very good book about trauma of all kinds, but it delves through the history of starting out with like PTSD and studying that in adults all the way down to neglect in children. And as I read through that book, which was very difficult for me to read, especially as I got into the chapters that described what I went through as a kid. I mean, very, very difficult. Like it would physically hurt me. And we'll get into the therapy side of things here towards the end of this. It also helped me to realize that not only was I not alone, but it's as bad as I feared it was. And it's worse than I let myself believe. Ooh, which is the truth. So a little bit about me growing up. I could tell stories all day long, I suppose, and I could biographize my life to some insane degree, but just kind of the anecdotes to give you an idea, maybe a vibe check, because I don't really know exactly how to pull you into the childhood that I had. But I've shared this story now in snippets, but migraines were kind of a central thing that helped me to understand how real this was, because I also didn't believe that any of it was very real. I mean, I knew it was, but I couldn't lean into it for a long time. And as a kid, I suffered from a lot of pain. I just didn't know why, and nobody knew why. So I'd have migraines from as young as I can remember. I don't even know. I don't know. They had to have started when I was like, boy, I don't know, 5 or 6. As much as I can remember, my entire childhood, I was riddled with severe, like debilitating migraines, at least a couple times a week, and just headaches all the time. And I would have to, get into a cold, dark place somewhere and just have this agonizing, and that was just my existence through middle school and high school especially. I definitely remember that. I know when I was younger as well, in elementary school. And it affected my life in a lot of ways, obviously. It wasn't until, again, reading The Body Keeps the Score that it turns out that that is a classic sign of ongoing child abuse. And the abuse that I suffered was hard to pin down because it was never physical. Like I don't, we got spanked a little bit when we were kids, but there was never any real threat of violence. Yet at the same time, my mom was persistently my chief antagonist in life. She was always there to belittle me, put down my hopes and my dreams, aggrandize herself, to take whatever attention she could from me, and to marginalize me in all kinds of ways. These stories can be kind of funny, I guess. I always thought about it in terms of if I was a wizened old grandpa someday, I could legitimately tell the kids that I had to walk uphill both ways in the snow, because we lived on one hill in my hometown and my middle school was on another hill. And I had a cello as a 12-year-old, and the cello was basically as big as I was, in a cloth case. And I had to carry that to and from school, a mile, both ways. So about a kilometer and a half, for those of you that don't think in miles. Basically, the only time that I could get a ride from my parents was if it was raining. Otherwise, as long as it wasn't raining, because it was a soft case, I was on my own. So freezing weather with snow, ice, all that, I literally was slipping and falling on ice, protecting this cello with my life just to get to and from school every day. And they had the ability to pick me up if they wanted to. Small town, they could have. At the time, that's just the way life is, right? But then when my sister got to the same school, magically, when the weather was bad, she got picked up and not. And here's the thing, too. I meant to say this in the disclaimer. I'm not going to share anyone else's stories in this, just my own. They're not mine to share. We can figure that out. My family and I are talking about our own stuff, and we're processing all this ourselves. But I will leave out their relationships with my mom. Just to say, it didn't really feel very good to get to high school and then look back at middle school and see my sister getting the rides that I so desperately craved because I didn't want to lug my cello through the snow for 20 minutes up and downhill when it was snowing. So that's one example. It's kind of a death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of a thing. I don't even know if this communicates, but I remember one time I got hit in the face with a dirt clod and came home crying because my eye had gone black. And my mom's classic response, this happened more than once, but anytime we came home bleeding, her initial response was always, don't bleed on the carpet. And she'd move us to somewhere where there's linoleum. And you might think, well, that's kind of, that's understandable and pragmatic. But that was it. She would resentfully patch us up, but there was no comfort, no hugging, soft spots. This is going to start sounding like a laundry list of stuff. I don't really know how many stories to tell. But that also makes me think of how one of the silver linings to my childhood is I'm really good at giving massages, but the downside to that, the reason for that, is because my mom would just make me give her a massage, like a shoulder rub, every time I came home. I'd walk in the door and she would snap at me and just point to her shoulders and expect me and make me do it, and would yell at me if I didn't. I had to rub her shoulders to satisfaction before I was released to go live my own life. And what I really hated was she'd make me do a deep scalp massage as well, because my hands would get all greasy and I hated that. So the way that I would get mild revenge was that when I found gray hairs, I would pluck them, ostensibly as a favor to her, and she hated it, but hey, she's making me rub her scalp, I'm gonna get away with it. So there was stuff like that. I just remember always having that presence of somebody who was always looking to crush the fun. Anything I enjoyed, she would try to curtail. She would make herself snacks and wouldn't make us food, She would hog the TV and make herself popcorn. She would burn the popcorn and claim she liked it burnt, but I always had the sneaking suspicion that she just did that so we wouldn't eat it. My sister thinks she might actually like it burnt, but it just kind of tracks that she would be that petty to do stuff like that. There's a long list of, this is the issue, is that there's a long list of small stories like that I think one-off sound just kind of like a quirk. All parents, all people have quirks. She would never share her water with us. and why would you want to share your water bottle with a snotty kid? I don't know. But at the same time, if you're a kid and you're thirsty and you're out and about and your mom won't give you water, then you start to kind of peel back, like, why you have anxieties about stuff like traveling, going places, going to the beach, or going out into the world. Will there be food? Will I have my needs met? Will I even have water? These are things that are in the back of my mind that I've had to actively work to overcome just because they weren't provided for me. And it's not even that they weren't provided for me. They were actively kept from me under the auspices of like not spending money and so forth. Like, hey, let's just grab food on the way home because we're hungry. No, we have food at home. And then waiting another hour and a half hungry to eat. There's a lot of hunger in my childhood, which explains a lot of my relationship with food today too. So, it's because I don't want this to turn into a laundry list of stories. I'm just trying to give you some context. But like that whole thing when I shared about how I don't like Christmas or my birthday because my mom wouldn't ever give me what I actually wanted, and she would get in the way. She would interfere with any plans to give us what we wanted. My dad, like, let's say we scraped our knee and we were crying, and my dad would be like, hey, let's get ice cream. Like, let's cheer you up. She'd be like, we have ice cream at home. Like there was no comfort. There was no nursing. When I was at home sick, it was a resentful thing. I got sent to school sick more than I got to stay home. And when I got to stay home, she made sure it was not pleasant because she didn't want me to enjoy it. She let me know that she prayed every night that if we did anything bad, the cops would catch us. So you can't trust your mom either way. If you do anything bad, don't tell your mom because she'll just turn you into the cops, apparently, is how we grew up. That money thing extended to clothes. She wouldn't spend money on us on clothes. She wouldn't spend money on us for any fun activities. We ended up not really getting to do so many things because she just didn't want to spend money, and if money was involved, she would surely make us stress out about it and let us know how stressful it was, and we weren't really worth that money. I wasn't worth tissues in my bathroom. Like I had my own bathroom in my teens, or I lived in the basement. I still use toilet paper to this day as tissues because she just never bought me tissues. She had always had boxes of Kleenexes in her bathroom, but not me. This is starting to come out, like now it's starting to like flood out. The story I was going to end on with this, with the money and not spending on us and getting in the way of it, this is the one time that my dad really stood up for me. I had like the jankiest teeth growing up and an underbite that wouldn't stop growing. So they said, we're not going to do braces until we can do the jaw surgery. And we can't do the jaw surgery until your jaw stops growing. So I went into college with just absolutely janky teeth and like a huge underbite. That's just the way it is. It's fine. But my parents had promised, they did braces for my sister, and they promised that they would do those for me when the time came. And that time just kind of kept getting pushed back. And they had money saved up for it because they knew there was going to be a surgery and whatever else. And when it came time to do the surgery when I was about 21, my mom tried to back out of it. She tried to be like, well, he's an adult now. And tried, like, I had, the braces. Thankfully, they had paid for those. And we were getting up to the time for the surgery, and it was going to be like 10 grand or something. And my mom really tried to not go through with it, which is a horrible feeling that your mom would like bail on you in the middle of a medical procedure. And thankfully my dad, I remember him getting mad about it, but I remember him defending me, and I ended up getting the surgery, thankfully, and that's how I have my pearly white smile, although the coffee's definitely trying to affect that as much as it can. And I could go on. It's funny how I just start sharing a few stories. I only wrote down a few here to try and give you a sense of context, and I'm nervous too, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, yeah, oh yeah, which is what always happens when you get into these things. And we'll get into like how I got through this and how it affected me. I think you can tell how it affected me as an adult. So I have a patron who asked why I always speak in gender neutral when I talk about my relationships, and it's tied to this. I refer to my mom as a female supremacist. My parents were very egalitarian. My dad was a pastor, and they actually were part of like an egalitarian society. They really worked towards like trying, kind of like feminism within the church kind of a thing. But my mom was really more, I think, just trying to establish her own sense of validity. And this is also part of the reason I didn't want to talk about this until I was in a good place about it, because I do see how my mom had her own upbringing and struggles and trauma, and there's so much that she had to go through, and I know that all of that had its impact on her, and I don't blame her for that. At the same time, she did what she did to me, and it can't be undone, and it's real. And one of the things was the way she taught me to relate to women. I've kind of shared this a little bit, but this is a combination of like my mom and the church and a number of things, but she was very strong in my head about how disrespectful it was to women to even let them know that you were attracted to them, and how dating and all sex, all of it, very disrespectful to women. Women should be held in esteem. Women are very capable. They're more capable than men. they're stronger than men, all these things. So a silver lining of that is I actually believe in the capacity of women as a man. Like I really do. It's one of the reasons that I have so many women on my team is because I do believe that they're hard workers and they're probably going to do a better job than a lot of men. And so far the women on my team are certainly proving that to be true. They're amazing. So on the one hand, I'm actually deeply egalitarian, but on the other, like I have so many narratives in my head that stopped me from being able to relate to women in the way that I wanted. So I have a lot of female friends. I've always been very good at making friendships, but moving into romantic spheres is terrifying because there's so much shame involved. And just because I want that is inherently wrong in the way that I was raised. And I know that's not true, but boy, was that a bad wiring. And this brings us to the fact that my brain is wired differently as a result of the way that I was raised. It's funny, I love my sister so much. And she and I have been great partners in this. I think that it was my sister confiding in me how difficult things were with my mom that angered me with my mom for hurting my sister and started the cascade of my revelations of understanding that things weren't right, but not knowing what to do about it and feeling trapped. And it took me probably about 5 years before I got into therapy. And I knew that my mom was at the root of it, but I didn't really know. I was like, oh, I'm sure there's other stuff in here. But pretty quickly in therapy, I remember the day that we walked up to this gray mass. That's the only way I can describe it. Like I was so overwhelmed as we walked up to this revelation. And the first time that I ever said that I don't have a mom who loves me, at least the way I need, right? I can never say that my mom doesn't love me because I don't know how she feels or what's going on in her brain. But I can say that I never felt loved. I have very few positive memories of my mom. And in retrospect, the few positive memories I have are really tragic to me because in reality, I was always grasping at straws and it was never what I really thought it was at the time. I remember walking out of therapy, my therapist here in Paris, who I love and I'm so grateful for, but I remember walking out and just sitting on the stairs in her building and just staring off into space for probably an hour. I don't remember, I couldn't even articulate it at that point. And so it's taken years to work through it. And a lot of that's because I don't trust anyone. I do now more and more. But when you're raised with the primary relationship that gaslights you, that tells you things aren't the way they are, that is always telling you how perfect your life is and how good everything is in our family and all this stuff and how other people are bad, or all these narratives that get into your head as a kid because you lean on and you rely on your parents to basically do the best they can to program you well. And nobody does it perfectly, but there is a difference between health and unhealth. And then you're raised believing you're healthy. You're raised believing that your family is actually above board and everything's great. It's really hard to deconstruct that because it's a part of your identity. It's a part of who you are. And now you're denying it. Now you're recognizing in real time that it's never been the case. And that is really, really hard. But I also had a very difficult time believing that it was real because nothing I ever experienced was real as a kid, right? I was told all my pain, all my struggles, the hardships, whatever, were minimized, weren't real, were overlooked, and were deflected into the pain of the other. I mean, how can we know for sure, right? But I believe my mom to be a narcissist. But I don't really exist to my mom insofar as like she's never been interested in me, thus the disinterested primary caregiver. She used to brag to people that she never read my books. She's very uninvolved, unless she could get attention out of it herself. I actually ended up blocking my mom from the comment section on YouTube because she started like divulging my personal secrets kind of a thing just to get attention from my own audience. There's a lot of stuff like that goes on, and it means that you no longer know what's real and you can't really trust yourself. It's part of the reason that I am such a tough person, that I don't really feel pain, is because I've had to dissociate from it to survive. And that's changing, it's coming back. But in therapy, when I finally got to the point that I asked my therapist if it was real, it took me 4 years to ask my therapist if it was real, if it was actually bad. Like, I knew the answer, but I couldn't stand the chance that she would gaslight me, that she'd be like, no, it wasn't that bad. Like everything, that's what I expected to hear. What I expected was like, it wasn't that bad. Like, you're fine. Could have been worse. And I remember the day that I actually asked her, this is just maybe 6 months or a year ago, that I asked, was it really that bad? Like, was this real? Did I actually suffer what I think I suffered? I was so scared to even voice like what I thought I suffered. My whole body shut down. Like, I was so overwhelmed and so stressed and so scared to ask that question. And thankfully now, I'm past that and I'm in a place where I have gone through. One of the things that they say Sounds like a sci-fi alarm of some sort. One of the things that they say in trauma therapy in particular, and I've seen elsewhere, but that I believe holds very true, is the only way out is through, which is why I think it's really important to share my experience as well, because I want to be free, and the only way that I can be free is to face all of this and to get back through it. And so the last 5 years now of therapy in particular, but even before that, have been the process of walking back into all of this and fighting my way through it. And there's no one that can do it except for me. And so about 4 years ago, it must be something like 4 years ago, I made the choice to go no contact with my mom, because through therapy and friends and mostly therapy, I came to the very difficult realization that I was never going to get what I needed from my mom, that the relationship that I wanted was not available and was never available. And there was nothing I could do about that. And it wasn't my fault. And to continue to go back to a poisoned well, looking for connection, looking for love, was only to get poisoned again. And it's hard because, like, family-wise, like, I know that there's a lot of shame. Like, my family does not appreciate or understand it. My extended family, at least. My sister and my dad are different, but my extended family, you know, they've never tried. They're not capable of understanding, or at least they've never demonstrated capacity. And it's not on me to make anyone understand. It's not on me to make anything happen. In this instance, I am the child, and it's not my place to mend everything, which it was as a kid. Like, it was put on me to mend everything, to keep the peace, to just show up and be a good son. And that's one of the identities that I had to shed, was the idea of being a good son. And it wasn't my fault. I just never had the opportunity to properly succeed at it. And that has been really hard for me too, because, you know, I was always raised to believe that you can always judge a man by his relationship with his mom, you know, which is a fun one that my mom liked to throw at me as well. It was something that kept me in bondage for a long time. I still have a ways to go. And I know that part of my brain is not as fully developed as I wish it was when it comes to bonding and trusting others. No offense to any mothers watching, but it's taken me a long time not to be terrified of mothers as a concept. It's part of the reason I don't want kids, I'm sure, but also not my fault, and I'm not going to try and overcome that just so I can have kids because society wants me to. I have come a very long ways, and I'm very grateful to the people in my life that have made it possible. And there is a lot of hope in the future. And if you're struggling with this, like, I'm not advocating for going no contact. I've got some good books I'll link below. Body Keeps the Score is a hard one, but, like, It's Not You is a great one for any narcissistic relationship. If you've ever had to deal with one, whether you were raised by one, sorry, good luck to you, or you've just encountered them in the wild, they are a beast unto themselves. There are a bunch of great books out there. I've read a lot of them. But I'll definitely link to those two below, because they were very helpful for me, and I know they've been helpful for others. And the point isn't to focus on the narcissist. It's not to focus on whoever it was that abused you, whoever it was that neglected you. In my mind, the point is to focus it back on healing ourselves and moving on and moving up. Man, the world is so much brighter on the other side. And I'm so grateful to myself for putting in the work and for really, really struggling through it all. And I mean, there's no good time to start. I definitely am an example of somebody hitting rock bottom, like I've shared before on here many times. I did a lot of this through also simultaneously so many other hard things, but they're all interrelated. And the reality is that my life was never going to get better, and my relationships with friends and with women and with my family were never going to get to a healthy place if I didn't deal with this first. I realized later that all the battles I took to other people and to other situations were battles I needed to fight with my mom. And I had to fight that with myself, because ultimately it's the mom I have in here. It's not the one that exists out in reality, because she's not somebody that I can ever actually relate to or take any of this to. And thankfully my dad is somebody who's doing the work on his own as well. And, like, that's a whole other story. But thankfully I have him and I have my sister. And we're navigating our way through it. And I'm really lucky to have the friends that I have here, and people who know my story and who love me and who've been able to validate so many things that I struggled to even see as real for so long. So I'm grateful. I'm in a really good place because of that. Even though I obviously look like a little bit of a wreck as a result, it's how I'm able to now actually bounce back in a healthy way from a relationship that doesn't work out, instead of spiraling into some really, really dark and self-destructive places. I've had a lot of rage, a lot of pain, a lot of anger that like I've just struggled with ever since I was a child. And I understand when I see people struggling with deep rage and fear. And I mean, I was so scared of being homeless. I always felt like I was one step away from being homeless. And I see these homeless guys on the street that are just yelling at the demons that no one else can see. And I see those demons. I know those demons very well. And I'm just so grateful that they are so much more quiet. Like, I don't know that I can ever fully exorcise those demons, but I've gotten really close. And I really want to encourage anyone out there who's struggling with it to believe in yourself, because no one else may ever believe in you. And even if other people do, it doesn't matter until you believe in yourself. And even if you can't, you don't feel like you can, just fake it. And act like you believe in yourself, and eventually it'll start. The pieces will start to fall into place, and it's so worth it. I've spent so much of my life wishing I was dead, and what I came to realize was that I never really wished that I was dead. I always wished that I was alive. I always wanted to live, and I was so angry that I felt like I'd never been able to. And that is something that we have power over, and that we can claim, and that we can walk out of. And eventually you can live. And then you can have a dog that drinks really sloppily, loudly, and interrupts the moment, and can do with that as you please. Anyway, this is long enough, and I could talk for hours and hours about it, which is good. And it's important. But I wanted to share at least this nugget of the story with you. If you've been watching my story unfold on YouTube, for one, I'm very grateful that I've been able to share it as best I can through this. And I know I've never really shared this directly about what my life has been publicly, but I know a lot of you have picked up on it. And there are a lot of people that have been tracking very well, and game recognizes game. And I suppose that goes for trauma as well. But I want to let you know how important my relationship with you has been as the amorphous blob that you are on the other side of my camera lens. When I reached out and started vlogging, it was an act of desperation. I really just hoped to be seen and to catch a lifeline from somewhere out there. Like, I was actually living with my mom at the time, and suffering the joys of that, and I really just wanted to make a connection. And I remember I should look up who this was, but I remember getting a Christmas package, a care package, from someone who was watching pretty early on. And I remember opening this care package in front of my mom, and my mom had just given me my Christmas present, and it was like a pair of socks. And she was so proud of herself, and so, you owe me so much for giving you these socks. And I remember opening this box from some stranger on the internet who was watching my videos, and this person had given me a care package that was full of everything that I needed. Really nice wool socks that I kept for a very long time, and like the deodorant that I was missing, and like just a bunch of stuff, like, but socks and underwear. In the weirdest way, it was like the exact kind of thing that my mom had always given me, but truly generous, like high quality, nice, great stuff. And I remember dumping this box out in front of my mom, and her jaw hitting the floor, and she was just flabbergasted by it. And it kind of shut her up, and she walked away, but she realized that the moment had been stolen from her glory, and she left. And that is such a great picture of what my YouTube community and my patrons have been for me over the last 8 years, is people that have shown up and shown me that, like, people can be kind that people can be kind, and they can be generous, and they see me, and they value me, and I am worthy of love, which I never felt until recently. And I have you to thank for that. And that's a big part of the reason that I've decided to vlog. If somebody finally figured it out, like, that's why I decided to vlog daily a little bit here again at the end of the year, in the midst of another really hard time in my life, because I wanted to express how much you've meant to me, and I wanted to make sure to capture the hard times, to share them, not because I want any pity or because I want anyone to think any particular way about me, but I want to give some hope to anybody out there that's struggling as well, and that thinks they're alone, and that thinks they're not worthy of love, because you are, and you may not even know it, but like, you actually really truly are. And you have shown me that in aggregate, and I will be forever grateful for that. You've saved my life in more in more ways than you can know. And I'm so grateful. I'm eternally grateful. I can never fully express it. And we'll talk about all of it more, I'm sure, in the future. But thank you so much. I will end it here because I'm a hot, sticky mess and I need to go meet some friends for lunch. But I'm so grateful you're here. Thank you a million times over for everything. Thank you.